Sir, we need to see your ID now.
Oh.
Two officers stood over a quiet man sipping coffee alone in the corner booth when he slowly raised a battered dog tag instead of a license. The entire diner fell silent. Only the young waitress stepped forward and said he's here every morning. He hasn't done anything wrong. They threatened to arrest her for obstruction, while customers looked away in awkward silence. But the next morning, 5 army jeeps rolled up outside. Who exactly did she protect, and why did the military come for her? On a cold early winter morning at a small roadside establishment called Holly's Diner, located just off the interstate highway, Lena Ray, 26, worked the morning shift every day. She always arrived first, personally wiping down tables, turning on the warmers, and checking receipts before anyone else arrived. Despite her challenging life, a mother suffering from osteoporosis and barely making ends meet, Lena maintained a quiet kindness that never wavered in the face of hardship. A strange man named John, appearing to be around 60 years old, sat in the far corner booth each morning. Nobody in town knew anything about him or where he came from. He always wore the same old jacket with frayed edges, kept his eyes down toward the tabletop, and drank his coffee, black without sugar, never starting conversations with anyone, but whenever Lena placed his cup down, he would acknowledge her with the slightest nod of his head. Once Lena accidentally left a handkerchief while clearing his table during the morning. Rushed the next morning, it appeared folded neatly on a bread plate. No words exchanged, just quiet respect. Other customers often whispered behind menus. He doesn't look normal, those eyes have seen things, probably been in prison. Lena always dismissed these comments with a gentle but firm tone, simply saying, "I think he was once a good man." That particular morning, 2 police officers entered, serious expressions moving with urgent purpose across the worn linoleum floor. They walked directly to John and demanded, "Sir, we need to see your ID." John slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver piece of metal. A military dog tag worn smooth at the edges. "That's not an ID," one officer said sternly. "We need government-issued identification." Lena stepped forward from behind the counter, her voice gentle but clear. "He comes here every day. He hasn't hurt anyone." They paused, turning toward her with hard eyes. "Are you obstructing a police investigation, miss?" The entire diner fell silent. Not a single person spoke up, all eyes averted, shoulders hunched in uncomfortable silence. Lena froze momentarily, but still stood her ground. "You can't just drag him out." After several tense minutes, they pulled John to his feet before exiting. He turned back, his calm gaze meeting Lena's, and nodded once deliberately. No one in the diner could have guessed that just 24 hours later, that simple nod would shock the entire town. What was in his eyes? At that moment, something deeper than words. "Who do you think he was?" comment. Veteran witness or ghost? Lena was called into the manager's office. During her shift that day, Mr. Halley, the owner's son, leaned against his desk with arms crossed and a frown etched across his forehead. "Look, Lena, I know you mean well, but you're scaring our customers when police officers arrive and you interfere with their business. That reflects very poorly on our establishment. We can't afford that kind of attention in these difficult times." She just lowered her head without arguing, fingers nervously twisting her apron. Knowing nobody wanted to lose business over the silent old man. Regular customers meant survival for the diner in this economy. "I understand," she whispered, though her heart disagreed with every word. "Good, and don't forget your position here isn't guaranteed. There are plenty of people looking for work these days." By late afternoon, news had spread through the small town. A suspect connected to a military storage theft was being sought, matching John's description perfectly. The local radio station mentioned a man in his 60s, military background, potentially dangerous, and warned residents to report any sightings. Townspeople buzzed with excited gossip, some even visiting the diner just to ask, where exactly did he sit? Or did he ever talk about weapons? They ordered the cheapest coffee while fishing for information, leaving minimal tips. Lena felt increasingly unsettled as she worked through her shift. Had she been wrong to stand up? Had she defended someone who didn't deserve it? Doubt crept in like the cold draft from the back door. Later that evening, just before closing time, when the diner was nearly empty, a strange man arrived, wearing pressed civilian clothes. but with a military bearing sitting precisely in John's corner spot. He didn't order anything, just gazed out the window at the darkening parking lot. Then spoke quietly when Lena approached with a menu. Some people carry past heavier than battlefields. Not all heroes wear uniforms forever before leaving. He left a folded piece of paper under his untouched water glass, which Lena opened after he departed. Inside was a faded photograph of a military unit in desert fatigues, with John standing in the center, wearing high-ranking medals and a commander's confidence. A glimmer of hope flickered within Lena. Maybe he wasn't a bad person after all. Maybe there's more to his story than anyone knows. But just as Lena was about to tell her manager about this new information, she was called into the meeting room and suspended for 1 week, without pay, for interfering with an official investigation and potentially harboring a person of interest. Returning home to her small apartment, where her mother waited with questions, Lena cried silently in her bedroom, the photograph clutched in her hand. What none of them knew was that night, an emergency meeting had been convened at a military base, 10 miles away, with John's file open on the table. Before several high-ranking officers, the next morning, while Lena was cleaning the old kitchen, having come in despite her suspension to help the understaffed diner. All unusual sounds erupted outside. The rumble of heavy engines broke the morning quiet. She rushed to the front windows, the entire street in front of the diner, filled with military vehicles. 5 army jeeps had parked in formation, their olive-green paint gleaming in the morning sun. People from neighboring businesses poured out to watch. Residents stopped on sidewalks, phones raised to capture whatever was happening. A group of 5 uniformed officers disembarked from the vehicles, led by a distinguished army colonel with rows of ribbons across his chest. He entered the diner first, the bell above the door announcing his arrival. The breakfast crowd fell silent, paused midair. He nodded respectfully to everyone present, then asked in a clear, authoritative voice, "Which one of you is Lena Ray?" She timidly stepped forward from the kitchen doorway, still wearing an apron, dusted with flour. The manager, who had suspended her, stood frozen behind the counter, mouth slightly open. The colonel placed a small wooden box before her on the nearest table. The polished surface reflected the overhead lights. He said, "You should have this." The colonel said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. Inside was John's medal, a silver star, one of the highest honors for valor, accompanied by a handwritten letter on military stationery. The letter, written in an elderly but steady hand, contained John's thanks to Lena for preserving his final faith in humanity. When it had nearly disappeared, he explained how he had been a sergeant who saved an entire company from an ambush in Iraq in 2004, pulling 3 wounded soldiers to safety under heavy fire. But after his honorable discharge, following a traumatic brain injury, nobody had cared about him anymore. The transition to civilian life had been brutal. He had lived in silence and isolation for years, once contemplating leaving this world behind when the nightmares and loneliness became too heavy to bear. But Lena's small kindnesses each morning, the way she treated him with dignity when others only offered suspicion, had kept him tethered to this world. Her daily good morning had become his reason to return. Sometimes the letter read, "Salvation comes in a cup of coffee, served with genuine kindness." The colonel turned back toward Lena, standing at formal attention, and offering a crisp salute that would normally be reserved for a fellow officer, leaving the entire diner stunned into absolute silence. Even the kitchen staff emerged to witness the moment he announced in a voice that carried to every corner, "From this day forward, the United States Army considers you an honorary member of our ranks. Miss Ray, what you displayed was the courage we hope to instill in every soldier, the willingness to stand alone for what's right." Another officer stepped forward, presenting a small medallion on a ribbon. "This is from John's unit. He wanted you to have it." The customers, those who had mocked Lena just the day before, or whispered about John, remained speechless. One man removed his hat, pressing it against his chest. Another turned away, wiping his eyes discreetly. Mr. Halley. The manager stared at the floor, the weight of his hasty judgment visible in his slumped shoulders. Lena didn't cry, though emotion shimmered in her eyes. She simply nodded, accepting the honor, with the same quiet dignity she had shown all along. This time, she was the one returning the gesture of respect. Where is he now? She finally asked. Safe, the colonel replied, and remembered. Do you believe a small act of kindness can change someone's destiny? If yes, comment yes or share an experience when someone quietly helped you. As it turned out, John wasn't the suspect police had been seeking. He had been mistakenly identified due to a blurry security camera image and his tendency to keep to himself. The real suspect had been apprehended 50 miles away. John's full name was John Mercer, Sergeant First Class, retired recipient of multiple commendations that had been forgotten by all but military records. His intervention during the 2004 ambush had saved 23 lives, but the brain injury he sustained had left him with speech difficulties and social anxiety that led to his isolated existence. And remarkably, Lena's intervention, reported by a nearby customer, who happened to be a retired military chaplain, had helped the Army's Veteran Affairs Department trace John's true identity. A decorated soldier who had fallen through the cracks of the system and lost contact 8 years prior. We've been looking for him, the colonel explained later, to present him with an additional honor and ensure he receives proper medical care. Your diner was the only place he felt comfortable enough to visit regularly. Lena's story spread beyond the town, first to local newspapers, then regional broadcasts. Many visited the diner, not to eat, but to see the waitress, who stood up for a forgotten hero when nobody else would. Business boomed, and Mr. Halley quietly promoted her to head waitress with a substantial raise. The corner booth where John had sat now featured a small brass plaque reserved for those who served veterans. Began to gather there, finding community where once there had been isolation. One day a little girl with pigtails tugged at her mother's hand, while Lena refilled their water glasses. Mom, I want to work here when I grow up. Lena smiled and crouched to the child's level. You don't need to work here, sweetheart. You only need to be kind. That's enough. Kindness can save someone when you least expect it. The manager who had suspended her also approached her privately, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine remorse. I was wrong, Lena. I was thinking about business when I should have been thinking about people. He placed a formal letter on her table, officially appointing her as the permanent head waitress with authority to train new staff. A final image. Lena cleaning tables at day's end. Sunlight streaming through the windows, catching John's medal, now displayed in a small case, by the register glimmering like a promise that small acts of human decency matter more than we know. Today's society too easily judges others based on appearances and awkward silences. Yet sometimes those we quietly dismiss carry battle honors, invisible to our eyes, and burdens we cannot comprehend. The dog tag Lena once saw in John's weathered hand wasn't evidence of guilt, but a symbol of forgotten honor and sacrifice that deserved recognition. She didn't just defend one silent man. She stood on the side of light, even when nobody else dared to stand with her. One voice, soft but unwavering, proved stronger than conformity and fear. And now others in small community have begun stepping toward that light, as well, recognizing that courage wears many uniforms, including a simple waitress apron. If you believe that even the smallest kindness deserves recognition, subscribe to QH Incredible Story. We tell tales of ordinary people who accomplish extraordinary things.